Hi everyone, welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. My name's David Holloway and I'm excited to be here with you as always. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, David. How are you?
Good. So for those that tuned in for part one of our interview with the amazing Bill Payne, Joe's joined us as a co-host because A, he's a fan, and B, he's a great guy. There you go, I actually said it, Joe. So we're really excited to bring you part two. There's lots more to cover on Bill's amazing career. He's got some great, both humorous and very insightful anecdotes around the music industry, advice for younger players, and so on. So we hope you enjoy part two, and we'll see you after the end of this episode.
Well, speaking of a lot of those guys, a lot of the players who I would probably consider generally your stylistic contemporaries, like Chuck Leavell, Gabe Dixon, Danny Lewis, Trevor Nealon, Benmont Tench. When you see them live, they're still using the old instruments. They're still, chucking around Hammonds, Leslies, Whirlies, clavs.
I said, look at who they're playing with.
Yes,
Right.
that's right.
That's part of what I was going to ask.
Those people, they got 100 buses and a crew that could wipe out Attila the Hunt's food market in about one day. No, I'm not. I keep saying I'm not knocking people. I know Ben Montich and Chuck and all those cats. If I could do it, I would have a real B3 on stage with me. I would. You can't replace a B3 any more than you can replace Lowell George. But there's certain things you can do even with that instrument by augmenting it with a synth. That is true as well. I'm not up there, nor are they, to present a museum piece to people. But they play those instruments because they really work, because the bands generally that they're playing with have the money to allow them to do it as well. I think all that stuff is wonderful, but it's not the. I heard Paul McCartney playing at the Budokan in Tokyo. And there's a friend of mine plays with him, Paul Wickens. And Wicks plays some sounds that, you know what, I think any of those guys you just mentioned, Danny Lewis, any of them, would sit there and go, my God, how does Wicks come up with those sounds? That's the beauty of it too. Like I said, I'm sitting next to a piano here. If I were to play that on my synth over there, you can't really replicate it. But I love the instruments for what they do and how they speak to me as a musician.
Yeah.
And so we, as musicians, guys, and you both might be players too. I mean, do you play music?
We do, yeah. We're both keyboard players, yeah.
All right. Well, then you know exactly what I want to say, which is we do things because we love what we do, and if we got to play a piano that has 61 notes as opposed to 88, and that's all we have in front of us, what's the old term? The old saying? It's a poor workman who blames his tools. We're going to go up there and play it, and the audience won't hear one word about it. We're just going to do our thing. And that's kind of the fun of it too, I mean, I love being able to I mean, just this weekend I was playing. I had an instrument. I couldn't hear I was trying to build in some reverb because I like to play to a little bit of reverb on the piano. I couldn't get it in there, so I knew the engineer that works for us and for Steely Dan, Donald Fagen, would put on the reverb himself without me saying anything. But what it got me to do was to play a little differently. Because when you have a little reverb going, it allows you to kind of go, bop. We play to what we hear, right? So if we're hearing something else, I thought, well, I know he's going to have it sounding good out front, but I'm still going to play a couple things that are maybe more percussive. I'm going to stick to more the middle of the keyboard, do the occasional high end run down the keys. And we were laughing about it later. And I even played Wurlitzer on a song that I normally play acoustic piano, or what sounds like an acoustic piano. So it's just kind of nice to say, yeah, I could drive a Ferrari, but I got a Volkswagen Beetle. What am I going to do
That's
with
right.
it?
Well, in your sort of defense, I know a guy here who apparently I haven't seen it myself. He owns one of your old Bill beer chops, and last I heard, it still doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, so
They do run out of gas eventually. I mean, it's I had this guy was working on one of the. I had like a transistorized B3, and people would go, "Oh, really? Hey, why would you use that?" I go, "Well, do you like what you heard on Waiting for Columbus?" They go, "Oh, that's yeah, super." I go, "Well, that's what that instrument was. It was this chopped down B3." But this poor guy was in there working on it. It nearly fried him uh, with electricity.
Wow.
I was like, man, maybe we ought to just give this thing a proper Viking funeral or something. Light it on fire out in a lake or something. I mean, I don't want to be responsible for people getting hurt.
I have a question that I want to go back to.
Okay.
Where to go? Because when you were in Houston, and you've talked about this other times, you talked
Okay.
about how back in the early days of the band, it was the Houston Welcoming Committee who convinced you that you wanted to continue touring, that you were kind of considering giving it up, I
Yes.
guess. And so what I was wondering about was, you made all this effort. I've heard the story about you were trying to join Frank Zappa's band, and that's how you got hooked up with Lowell. They said, "Oh, check this guy out. Meet up with this guy." If you want to tell that story, go ahead. But what I was wondering is, if you did, if you did give up touring, what were you thinking of doing at that point? Because it seemed like your focus was just to play music in a band, and if you give that up, what were you going to do?
I guess run a brothel or something and play piano in it. I don't, I don't know. I was just a kid. I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. We met some beautiful women down there and girls, and it was just that first tour was like, uh, bring on the fudge, the vanilla fudge. We're up in Cleveland. I mean, people didn't know us or even like us necessarily. Uh, and we get to this in Texas, and where I was born, Texas, and uh, all of a sudden it's like, take your pick of there's 5 women in this room. Take your pick, and I go, what? I just got back from lunch with my uncle John, who used to work for Shell Oil, and I just thought, you know what? Maybe touring's not such a bad thing. So it's purely, I mean, it's like, you guys are musicians. Why'd you join a band? Oh, to meet girls. That kind of thing. That was a standard answer when we were like teenagers, right? Well, yeah, I want to meet girls too, but I also want to play music. But the touring aspect of it was really overwhelming to me.
Yeah.
I just thought, what am I doing and why? But so, yeah, I was enough of a cretin to pull such into the dialogue and go, well, I guess if they got that and now I can have a chocolate cake or some brownies every now and then, maybe it's okay.
It's
I,
great perspective.
I have simple needs and wants. I'm
Yeah.
a very complicated person.
No, absolutely. No, that's a brilliant answer,
That's a
Bill.
great
And
question, by the way.
yeah, great question. It is a great question. Yes. So, I mean, sometimes things don't go well on stage
Yeah.
or on tour. Bill, have you got a memorable train wreck where something's just gone spectacularly wrong that you can sort of look back now on and laugh?
I'm going to choose James Taylor for this one. I was I was utilizing, and Randy Newman was on this tour with us, by the way, and we had a chuckle over it later. But we're in front of a few, 20,000 people, something like that, maybe a few less, maybe a few more. But I had a synthesizer hooked to a sequencer that I was using to emulate horns and to a couple of other things. And I counted it off wrong. So when I hit the button, it wasn't going to work, and uh, I stopped the show to say, "Hey, wait, stop!" And I go, "Let's do this again, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just pretend we're in the studio in Los Angeles for a moment. This is going to be take two." And James is like looking at me like, "What?" I go, "Take two, count it off, boom," and we started. So it could have been a train wreck. It wasn't. The real train wrecks, to answer your question, are the ones that could be with any group. It could be the next time you play with your own bands. And what happens is 9 and 9/10 of the time, those train wrecks occur because you can't hear one another properly, which distracts you from the arrangement, which takes you out of where am I in the song, and which brings you to, if not fisticuffs, at least harsh words when you get off stage, right? It's like beatnik poetry. You cut up some words and arrangements and whatnot. You throw them into a hat. You pull them out. You go, oh, the chorus to "Time Loves a Hero." Why am I always missing this? Instead of counting 6 beats, I'm counting 4 or whatever. That just throws everybody off. There's other things too that can cause angst with musicians, and it's when you're dealing with your singer. I don't care who the singer. It could be Stevie Nicks. It could be anybody. But I'm from the school of thought that the singer is the one in control. They they come in early. You come in with them. If they are late coming in to something, or if they forgot it and they decide, "Oh, I'm going to sing it now," you don't embarrass them by blowing past where they should have come in. You simply go in with them, and nobody's the wiser. Drawing attention to that stuff is sometimes what we do, and it's not right. But when you're in a band, kind of doing the normal train wrecks, all right. I think people that go to hear concerts, oftentimes they actually like that part of it. It's like Destruction Derby, right? Oh, did you hear that Paul and Bill, they were staring at each other in an angry fashion because somebody missed something in the song. And they're okay. They made up later. I saw them later. They're laughing about it. Yeah, that kind of thing. Or you go to see the Grateful Dead. Yeah, Bobby Weir and Jerry, Jerry weren't in sync on this. They're vying to see where they're gonna pull the next song. That's just, you know.
And I think that's a particularly popular pastime for musicians that go to other bands' gigs. I know I love, determining what the dynamics are with the band on the given night that I'm watching them.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to the rodeo. Who's going to ride the bull, and who's going to ride the horse, and who's the clown? So there we are.
Well, that reminds me of that happened with Richie for was it the recording of "Let It Roll" that he couldn't hear it?
Yes. Now that story, we were in a rehearsal mode, Joe, for 5 weeks, and I'd say about I don't know, end of the first week, Richie came up to me and I said, "Hey, let it roll." And he goes, "I don't like that song." I go, "You don't like it?" And I didn't say why. I just went, "Wow." I went home and I took that song out of rotation for maybe 2 weeks. I agonized it over the entire time. We obviously had a lot of other songs we were running, and I thought, well, I got to keep my focus on these other tunes. But every time I think about "Let It Roll," I went. So I finally marched into Richie and I said, "Can you hear what I'm playing? Can you really hear what I'm doing?" He goes, "No." I go, "All right, brother. What we're going to do is I'm going to make sure you hear what I'm playing, and we are recording this song, period." And because when I played "Oh Atlanta" for the band the first time, we were in the studio then, not rehearsing. I just played it for them. And the looks on their faces were like, eh, who cares? You know, that kind of thing. And I once again said, well, you know what? I honestly don't care whether you like the song or not. We're gonna do it. We're gonna play it at some point. So a lot of it is about conviction. Uh, and if they really don't like it, it's not going to sound good. But
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes it's just you catch somebody in a mood that's not conducive, or maybe we're in the studio, not everybody can hear properly once again, or maybe I'm not playing it as such because I'm just playing an acoustic piano and singing some kind of weird melody over it. And but yeah, being in a band is not for the faint of heart. It's you gotta have an ego that can absorb uh, not only the gosh you're great, but you suck, get out of here, that kind of stuff.
So, what advice would you give to aspiring musicians who are just starting out, trying to establish themselves?
This day and age, I don't think the advice has changed. Uh, I think that the circumstances that we apply the advice to has changed radically. So I can't advise new musicians or new groups on how to find their audience. That is perennially the object of dismay and elation when you figure it out. What tools do you have to find your audience? So I'm not skirting the issue of, of the advice I'm going to give now. My advice to musicians is learn your instrument. I mean, learn how to play it. Learn the scales, whether you play scales or not. Know that when you're in the key of G, that there's one sharp that you're going to be playing. And if you're playing the F natural on there, do 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 do. Now you're playing the blues, or you go do 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 do. You're going from the F sharp to the G. Know what you're doing, and know what you're doing when you're in the key of C sharp. Uh, so you're at a B to a C to a C sharp. Do, 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 do. That kind of thing. So that's where scales come in handy. And what you're really doing at the end of the day, and I have one more piece of advice after this, what you're doing by learning your instrument and knowing scales and knowing exactly what you want to play is you're uh, broadening your vocabulary. The way you speak to people is through vocabulary. So music the same way. Uh, to further that analogy, I also tell people because there's a lot of groups out there, and I'm not knocking. I keep saying I hate to. I'm not denigrating or knocking groups that play. All they play are the Rolling Stones. All they play are Little Feat. All they play are the Allman Brothers or Tchaikovsky. All I'm saying is if this band is important to you beyond that, and it doesn't have to be, but if it is, then begin the process of learning and enjoying the thrills and spills of writing your own songs. That's going to be the level that will sustain you through the rest of your career, whereas playing other types of music might do the same thing, but you can always, play Little Feat or Tom Petty music. Find out what you're made of. To find out if you have a vocal that will not emulate somebody, but emulate that person that's inside you. And play the instrument that is you, that's not Ben Montench or Bill Payne.
Yeah.
See, if you can play my stuff, or probably Ben Watts as well, for that matter, or Roy Bittan with the E Street Band, you've got enough acumen as a musician to discover what's in you as a player, as a writer, and a composer.
Absolutely. That's great guidance too, Bill. Thank you. That's superb. I'd be happy to play half as good as one of the three of you, let alone all three. So
Well,
we're going to launch into our regular questions, Bill. So first one is we ask guests to tag a keyboard player. So someone who you may know or you'd be actually personally interested in finding out more about their career in music as a keyboard player?
Well, one guy I have a lot of books on him here in the house that I was interested in and still am is Gould, who I've mentioned a few times. Uh, his playing was extraordinary on a lot of levels. I'll simplify it to say that he marched to his own drummer when it came
Yeah.
to playing Bach, to playing Berg, to playing anything, to Brahms, to the point where when I think it was a Brahms concerto he was going to play with Leonard Bernstein, Bernstein took it upon himself with Gould's permission, I'm sure, to explain to the audience that they had a difference in how the tempi of the song, let's say. So in other words, how the song was going to be uh, played for them that night and under the guise of who would have control over, where Bernstein would normally have more control than he did. I thought that was cool. On a rock and roll level, uh, man, Little Richard, I uh, I don't know that you'd learn more about him, but as you listen to people, Lowell and I used to talk about the connection between things, right? So if I'm listening to Little Richard, I'm listening to let's say the cat that played with Chuck Berry, Johnny,
John Johnson.
yeah, Johnny Johnson. For rock and roll stuff, the guy that played with Elvis in the early stuff, with Jailhouse Rock. Um, Listen to those music. Find out who they are. Find out who else they played with. Uh, if there's anybody that ever wrote about them. I'm just put the detective hat on. That's kind of what I do, you know. So uh, I don't have any specific people that I do that with. I would I'd mention Wayne Shorter, but also Joe Zawinul. I mean, his playing, his technique, uh, he played amazing acoustic piano, yet he primarily played synthesizers. But every now and then you get him on acoustic piano and you know, the room would go silent in awe, I suppose. Um, I'm like, not unlike anybody else, in that people come up to me and say, "Hey, have you heard such and such, so and so?" I go, "No."
No.
And they go, "Well, check him out or check her out." I want to mention a pianist. She's a classical pianist. I wrote to Jeff Bezos. Is it
Oh, yeah.
Bezos? I wrote him and I said, "Look, here's who I am. Here's who I play with." And I wanted to ask him a question about uh, paying musicians for this big new thing that he had going on, which I didn't know what it was. I said, "You don't have to answer me, but maybe one of the people from your music department could." So one of the people in his music department, who was a vice president at the time, he wrote me back. He says, he acknowledges that he knows who you are, and he says if you don't have this certain device, it's like the Echo or the whatever hey Alexa, I call her Our Lady.
Yeah.
Uh, if you don't have one, he'll send you one, which he did. And then I go, gosh dang it, I got to pay another sum of money to get all the music on there I want, which I gladly did. But in doing so, I discovered Mitsuko Uchida, who plays, I think she's an American artist, but she's Japanese heritage. And she plays beautiful Schubert and
Great.
Mozart and all the rest. So that process of discovery of players is still very much in what I'm doing.
There's some great picks there. There's some great picks there, Bill. And I never thought in the 80 plus episodes of this podcast I'd ever heard I'd ever think Jeff Bezos would come up in discussion. So that's brilliant on its own. That's great.
It was while he was still with Amazon, and
Yeah.
people start throwing. Well, they were always are going to throw rocks at somebody like that. But he showed his true colors for me, at any rate, which was, you know, I don't know what the plan is to pay people, and I think he was honest about that.
Yeah.
Now, I take advantage of that particular, Amazon Music to through whatever program I have with Amazon to it's enriched my life immeasurably, to tell you the truth. So all's fair in love and war, I guess.
So our next question is: if you didn't have that access to all of that music, and you had to pick 5 albums, this is the dreaded Desert Island Discs question. What
Well,
would be your 5 albums that you would live with?
I would pick the Beatles album that had Norwegian Wood on it. There's a record that John Lill, who's a pianist, played on, and it was Brahms' Second Piano Concerto. Do, 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 do. I'd love to have that at my beck and call. The first rock and roll record that Dylan made, which was I'm sitting on a Mayflower when I thought I spotted some land. That one. I can't think of the name of it, but it was his first foray. I saw a Dylan record. I got 2 more choices. I'd want something from the R&B category. Let me go with Sam and Dave. Lastly, because there is no last, it's just a part of something that maybe makes you think of the entirety of what you can't hear. But like a camera, you don't take every picture, but you can still remember the photos that were in front of you that you missed, which is what uh, Ansel Adams used to talk about. So I'm going to try and pick an album that would allow me to hear songs and records that I don't have access to, but put me into an alignment with them nonetheless. So what might that record be? And it might be something as simple as a musical, let's say Leonard Bernstein, who we talked about earlier, and West Side Story, the first recordings. Because when you listen to
Great.
that, guess where else that lick is? Fat Man in the Bathtub, right? So you go from that, all the genres of music that floated through that, and the singing and the shouts and the dancing you can see when you close your eyes. Those things hit a part of history in music when there was an innocence to music. The Drifters, there goes my baby, or Sam Cooke, which might have been that one. Down on the boardwalk, thinking about New York or something, Chicago. That's what I mean. I've never ever answered that question for people because I go, I have no idea what I choose. It's been so much fun talking to you guys. I just have enjoyed it so much. And it really got me thinking, and maybe writing this book is doing the same thing, where I'm thinking outside the box a little bit to say, hey, yeah, that's the only records we'll have. But Beethoven couldn't hear. He could still hear music. We can too. So we'd be blessed to have those 5 albums. But what will we hear in addition to that, even when we can't hear them?
Great, great perspective and great picks, by the way. Yeah, love all 5 of those. So thank you, Bill. And we're on to our final question, which is in 10 parts. So it's what we call our quick fire 10. So short, sharp answers to some what I believe are somewhat easy. So the first keyboard you ever owned, Bill, was it the blonde piano that you trashed?
No, the first piano I owned, in terms of at my parents' house, was a Henry F. Miller.
Okay, great
Baby
answer.
What's your most important pre-gig ritual?
Going to the bathroom.
I think you're about the second person in the last 3 episodes I've said that. I think for all of us, that's a really important golden rule. I love it.
Exactly. Cut to the chase.
Yeah, that's right. Keytars, Bill, are they sexy or are they an abomination?
Oh, keytars. I said, oh yeah, of course. I don't think they're either. I think they're a choice of Jan Hammer, who used to play it, right? I think he did a brilliant job with it. It's not my cup of tea, but Better him than me. How's that? At least he made it work. It's not great.
I think I know the answer to this one. Transpose button or adjust on the fly?
I will adjust on the fly every time.
Yep, I assume that would be the case, which is great. So,
But
favorite?
I'm not beneath hitting the transpose button.
No,
But
no, but you certainly got the
you know,
ability to do otherwise.
because what you're intimating by doing it on the fly is you don't have time to hit the transpose button. If
True.
I'm in a session, maybe I would do it and a half. So okay, there you
Now, this may be an impossible question, Bill, given the number of gigs you've done, but is there a favourite gig you've ever done?
go. There is not a favorite gig I've ever done.
No, that's okay. I assume so, given the amount that you've done.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'll just cherry pick this one. There's a, and I probably mentioned Bob Dylan earlier. Well, I'll mention in this context if I haven't already. We played at the Bottom Line in New York, and years later, I'm playing with Phil Lash, and Bob's opening up the shows for Phil. He could open or close them. He just wanted to open so he could get in his bus and leave. So I wanted to introduce my son to him, and Bob walks up and goes, "Hey, Billy, you remember the Bottom Line?" And I go, "God, how the hell does Bob know my name?" Of course, I
Yeah.
guess he would, but it was, I go, "Yeah, Bob, you were sitting just off of to my right in this, just off of center, and about 3 or 4 rows back, and you scared the hell out of me." That was a cool gig.
I know what the answer I think you should say, but I won't pressure you. What's your favorite city you've ever played?
Was it Houston or Houston? No. Well, it was my first city that I loved. I'll tell you that.
No, good answer. Good diplomatic answer, Bill.
Yeah.
What's the best thing about playing live that you still love today?
I think that it's the energy that and the connection with the players on stage, with the audience. That things can occasionally just cause you to laugh out loud at how well somebody's playing, or the poignancy of a song where it brings a tear to your eye. It doesn't do it every night, but every now and then something taps you on that shoulder, right? It's just the human quality of sharing music with people that are there to embrace that sharing and to add to it and to complete that handshake that musicians love and that audiences love too.
And on the other side of that, what is the worst thing about playing live?
Going on to a travel schedule, or actually, yeah, just the travel can be a little tough sometimes. I guess the worst thing on stage, it doesn't happen very often anymore, if at all, is not being able to hear properly.
Great. So name one thing you'd like to see invented that'd make your life as a keyboard player easier.
Oh, I think what would be cool would be to have a keyboard that they almost sort of have them, I guess, but just access to sounds that, well, I don't know. It seems like I'm trying to really figure out what would make my life easier. And it's not about making it easier. It's just about, I can get away with playing one keyboard if that's all I've got. I like using 3 if I can get away with it. And it's not about, so I guess it's not about being easier. It's just about having access to sounds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's really it, I guess. I don't really have
No, that's great.
a good answer for that.
And finally, what's your favorite non-musical activity or hobby that you like to do?
Well, I was out playing golf yesterday, which I call flog. And
Yeah.
for those that play golf, I was only playing 9 holes, and I took a mulligan on the third hole, which was a par 3, because I topped the ball. So though I was hitting from the seniors, which are a little closer, and I shot a 43. which is pretty good. So it's
Absolutely.
first time this year I actually kept score. But I love golf because it's frustrating game you'll ever play in your life, um, and it's something if you really love playing it, it's something that you'll really think about and try and work on, and it's it aids and abets who you are as a musician, as an athlete, as a thinking person, and it's a great way to get outdoors, whether you ride or walk or both, to keep somewhat grounded in this earth. Uh, as I said, golf backwards is flog. I think it's either Mark Twain or Will Rogers said golf is an excellent way to ruin a good walk.
That's right.
Yeah.
But that said, Bill, I mean, I'd argue you're, the Tiger Woods of keyboards. So using a golf analogy, I'm sad we have to wrap it up there, but we do. It's been an absolute honour and pleasure speaking with you. I'm very excited about the book. Do you have a rough timeline for when that may be out? Are we talking next year or?
It'll be next year. I hope it's next year. If not, I hope very shortly thereafter. But yeah, I've got a lot of work to do. I've got a lot of bins with. I started collect. Joe, you nailed it earlier. I started writing copious notes, not on everything, but I started day at a glance books starting in 1973. I've got a few notebooks that are before that. So the vagaries, excuse me, of memory are there in big time, and we all remember things a little differently sometimes. But it's been a journey that I'm really enjoying because uh, it works the mind. It really works uh, how you think about things, how you compartmentalize things, uh, what's important to you as opposed to what's important to somebody else. And uh, I approached my girlfriend. I said, How did we meet?" She goes, "You don't remember how we met?" I go, "Oh no, God, I'm already in trouble with you. Sorry." So it's been one of those. It's been great.
And so, no, look, thank you so much, Bill. I'd argue your sense of humour, let alone your playing ability, is what's made you such a successful musician, and there's lots more to come. So we look forward to hearing about it. And again, cannot thank you enough. Really appreciate it.
Same here, fellas. And Tom Garnsey, by the way, is the person that put your your program Keyboard Chronicles in front of me, who I then put in front of Dennis McNally. I'm going to thank Tom, who's been going through a couple of tough things. I want to thank him profusely for him pointing me in both your directions. This has been a real enjoyable and an honor on my end as well to talk to you both.
And there we have it. Joe, I've got to say, and I did say this to you offline, in Australia, and because I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, I sort of missed Little Feat a little bit, and it's something I've regretted. And over the last 5 to 10 years, I've sort of discovered them in depth for the first time and have grown to love them. But for someone that's been a fan a little bit longer, how did you find that, Joe? That was a bit of a pleasure?
Yeah, it was great. It was insightful. It was, some perspectives that we hadn't had from him before, I think. And he's been around in a good way, and it's excellent to hear his perspective and his open-mindedness and how his creativity works. And yeah, it was great to hear, and it confirmed a lot of what you might suspect about him. With such a long career, such a productive career, such an in-demand session player, who's played with so many great artists, you have to have a good attitude to do that.
That's right. And we make, Paul and I usually make 2 points that absolutely apply to Bill here. Number one, we barely scratched the surface. I mean, Bill mentioned Paul Simon in passing and Bonnie Raitt and Sting. Like, there are so many wonderful rabbit holes you could go down there. The other thing that we also mentioned is just how nice most of our guests are. And Bill is obviously a true gentleman, and it was an absolute pleasure to speak with him. So, yeah, can't thank you enough, Bill, if you're watching this. For your time, it's much appreciated.
Yeah, he mentioned his upcoming book, and he said he's 40,000 words into it already. So there's a lot for him to talk about. So yeah, there was more than we could possibly cover in one episode.
No, absolutely. I'll definitely be buying that book too. It'll be a great one. So yeah, that wraps us up for this episode. As always, we'd like to give a shout out to our gold and silver supporters. Number one this time, I'd like to mention the musicplayer.com forums. Joe, you and I met on those forums. You and I have met face to face at NAMM because of those forums. We both love the forums. Anything you want to say about musicplayer.com?
No, not really.
No.
No, it's a great hang for music players, for musicians, and there's I wouldn't be where I am as a musician without it. I've learned so much from the community there. There's so much great going on, gear and playing and everything else.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all there. It's all there.
And I have forgotten to mention a lot of times that this podcast has a sub forum there too, where you can provide, on top of all the other means of communicating with us, any feedback on shows, detailed suggestions, that sort. So yeah, definitely worth a check out. So thank you, Dave, and the team at musicplayer.com. Brother Paul Brown from the Waterboys, love your work, Brother Paul. Appreciate your ongoing support. There's been, again, I know I always say this, but Brother Paul has the most wonderful photos he posted, and there's some of him in action on a guitar in the last week. A sweat-laden Brother Paul really kicking ass. It's great. So, yeah, love your work. And speaking of loving people's work, Tammy Catcher of Tammy's Musical Stew, we couldn't do this without you either, Tammy. Really appreciate your ongoing support. Tammy recently bought one of our T-shirts and has proudly displayed it. It's great. And I actually did bring my own. No, I didn't. I'm wearing a Stranglers T-shirt, not a... Yeah. Anyway, I forgot to take my jacket off, Joe, before the show started. I realised once I started. Radio Grande, a brilliant YouTube channel that does funk reimaginings of some classic songs. I can't recommend Radio Grande. They've done a wonderful cover in their last release of Gautier's Somebody That I Used to Know, and it's brilliant. Highly recommended. And last but definitely not least, Midnight Mastering. So if you look, Google midnightmastering.com, Mike and the team there do a brilliant job. I use them for all my solo work, so any downfalls of my solo work is not on the mastering and mixing, it's on my capability as a composer. So yeah, thank you, Mike. We appreciate your support. So, Joe, particular thanks to you. Really appreciate you joining us, and I'm sure we'll have you back at some stage in the future.
Well, thank you for having me. It was my pleasure and honor, especially starting out with Mr. Billy Payne.
Yes, that's a great way to start. Absolutely. So, and most importantly, a big thank you to all of you out there. We super appreciate your ongoing support. We keep going from strength to strength because of you, and we'll be back in a fortnight or so with our next episode. See you then.